Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Maple Conservative Girl podcast. I'm Danica, and today I am talking about the cracks forming inside the Liberal government. We've got MPs stepping down, internal concerns being raised over the fast tracking of the MOU with Alberta for this pipeline, and even media panels on CTV openly acknowledging that for most Canadians right now, affordability and the economy matter more than climate policy. So the question is simple. Is the Liberal coalition starting to fracture under pressure? And what will Mark Carney do about it? So if you like this episode, please share, subscribe, share with somebody who you think might benefit from listening to this, and let's get right into it.
Repeated and serious inconsistencies with respect to proof of ID and actions in the voting area that completely undermined any ballot secrecy. But don't take it from me. Our chief scrutineer, Andreas Katsouras, has 25 years of experience working with political campaigns and promoting democracy. He's trained, supported, or participated in election observer groups in Armenia, Belarus, Egypt, Tunisia, Venezuela, the West Bank, Gaza, Uganda, Yemen, Ukraine, and more. So here are his words, not mine.
I'm Andreas Katsouras. There was an organized effort by Mr. Hafiz's campaign on Saturday to direct, monitor, and pressure people throughout the voting process, from the time they walked into the building to after they cast their ballots. We saw many cases of people hanging around in the voting area, telling voters what they should do. Multiple people took calls on speakerphone or video so they could get instructions right in the voting booth. There were many cases of people taking pictures of their ballots on their cell phones. When we pointed this out, party officials acknowledged this had been taking place throughout the day. In most of the world, this would be considered clear evidence of vote buying. Among the large number of temporary residents who voted, many couldn't tell us their address when asked and defaulted to documentation. An unusually high number of people claimed to have just lost their driver's license or just moved to the area. The party provided a list of IDs it would accept, and then it broke its own rules. Dozens and dozens of asylum seekers voted with their refugee claimant documents. Others were able to prove their addresses using just an apartment lease, sometimes unsigned, and two of which listed voters under 18. Other non-standard forms of ID accepted included digital report cards and Amazon orders. One man even voted with a foreign visitor's visa. In the last hour or two, the party lost control of the voting process nearly entirely. Various people came and went, moved throughout the room, or hung around with little scrutiny. Our team witnessed repeated irregularities, people voting and then returning to the credentials line, people staying in the voting area long after they had voted, people entering the voting area via the exit. As a Canadian and as a Liberal, I was embarrassed by what I saw on Saturday.
So because of all this, he is challenging the results of the election. And what's interesting about this whole situation is the irony of it all. Like I spoke about on Monday, for years, people like Nate supported record high immigration levels, mass population growth, and policies that fundamentally changed the demographics of communities across Canada. And anyone who raised concerns about integration, national identity, or election integrity was dismissed as intolerant or conspiracy-minded. Now, suddenly, after losing the seat that he wanted in Scarborough Southwest, he's talking about irregularities, questioning the process, and challenging the election results. And as he should, it's clear that there was some form of corruption. I mean, he has every right to challenge it, but now we're allowed to challenge and question the system? Now that they're experiencing the consequences of their own policies? I'm sorry, but I do not feel bad for this guy at all. Because conservatives like me and ordinary Canadians have been raising concerns about election integrity, immigration policy, and political patronage for years. And every single time, the establishment's response was, "Everything is fine, guys. Stop asking questions. Stop being conservative." But now that one of their own loses, now the conversation changes. Now it's okay to challenge the election. And Look at the Liberal Party itself. Mark Carney wins the leadership with overwhelming support across the entire country with like a consistent 80%. Not allowed to question it. Ruby Dalla gets pushed aside. Don't you dare question why, you nasty conservatives. Chandra Arya, a sitting MP, gets blocked from running for leadership while Mark Carney steals his seat. He kicked him out after years of sitting as an MP just so that he could take over in Nepean. But that's okay, guys. You can't question that either. But we can question Pierre Poilievre's MP giving up his seat, giving it up to have him run. They call him a loser. That's okay though, right? The bigger issue here is accountability. A lot of Canadians feel like the country is changing too fast, without public consent and without serious discussion about whether our institutions can even handle it, which obviously they can't. People want immigration that serves Canada's interests, not policies that look like they're designed to build permanent political support for one party. And yes, I believe election laws should be strict and crystal clear. Only Canadian citizens should vote in Canadian federal elections. Period. You don't own a Canadian passport, you shouldn't be able to vote. You're under 18, you gotta wait till you're 18. Sorry. If you're not a citizen, you should not be casting a ballot in a national election. That's not radical, that's basic sovereignty. And the left is apparently all about sovereignty. What makes this moment politically fascinating is that the very system many liberals defended for years and ran on for years is now being questioned by liberals themselves because the consequences finally landed in their own backyard. They're reaping what they sowed, and that's why so many Canadians are looking at this situation and saying, you helped build the system, now you have to live with it. You reap what you sow. And I hope Nate cries and cries and cries harder and harder and harder, further exposing how liberal policies are just not good and not serving actual Canadians.
You said every vote counts. Your party now has a majority. Are you going to resign your seat?
Yes. Yes. I said what I said, and I'm going to stand by what I said. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. I've talked to the Prime Minister's office. I've been in fairly regular touch. They asked me to stay on, so I stayed on. I mean, you can say I'm not a team player, but I put myself through a lot, in some cases, quite a lot of criticism in order to make sure we supported a really tough parliamentary minority. We're in an easier space now, and the last conversation I had with the Prime Minister's office was, you know, I'll give a farewell speech in June, and I'll resign over the summer, and they'll have enough time in an orderly way, hopefully have a nomination, and I know their nomination will be well run.
Another by-election for these liberals. It's so funny how when there's a by-election that's triggered by the Conservatives, they're like, oh my God, like Pierre Poilievre's by-election. He's spending so much money. Like it's so expensive to have a by-election. But now the liberals just keep having by-elections, one after the other after the other. So now that they have a liberal majority, now that they're safe, this guy's stepping down. But only in June. I'll believe it when I see it, buddy. I'm sure that Mark Carney, I don't know, because Mark Carney, I feel like there's a lot of tension between them two, so maybe he's happy that he's gone, but maybe he'll offer him a cabinet position, and who knows, maybe he'll stay. I mean, the majority is very slim, right? And maybe Avi Lewis will run in that by-election and win. Who knows? Because Nate Erickson-Smith is, like, he's like a far-left liberal. He's like an NDP. But this guy should have resigned before he even said that he wanted to run for party leadership in Ontario. But they needed him for that majority. Every seat counts, right? And now, a new possible Liberal leader has come out, Eric Lombardi, coming out on social media and saying this: Canadian leaders are too afraid to engage seriously with the frustration that many normal people feel about immigration after the last few years, but I share many of their concerns. We have made honest conversation too difficult, and in Ontario especially, we have been naive about the effects of sudden population growth on housing, wages, infrastructure, public services, and yes, social and cultural cohesion. Immigration has historically been one of Ontario's greatest strengths. It helped build our industries, our cities, and our prosperity. He's right. He is very right. But is this man a liberal or a conservative? Because the liberals love mass immigration. They don't believe in deportation. But now here is an Ontario liberal getting tough on immigration and temporary residence than Doug Ford. Tougher than Doug Ford. I mean, Doug Ford is not a conservative. Come on, he's a progressive liberal who's in it for himself. But politically, this could become a huge headache, even a problem for Doug Ford, because for years, Ford benefited from the Liberals refusing to acknowledge public frustration over housing costs, overcrowding, healthcare strain, international students, and the explosion in temporary residents. He could blame Ottawa for all of the problems of Ontario. He criticized them sometimes, but other times he praised Carney. Like, he's so wishy-washy, he flip-flops from one, he follows the polls and he just flip-flops all the time. Like a couple weeks ago, he was praising Carney as a great leader, but just the other day, listen to this.
People every single day how the cost of living is going up. I hear it from single parents. I hear it from seniors. You can have two philosophies when you're elected. You either gouge people to death on taxes, which the vast majority of municipalities and provinces and federal government across our country does, or you cut costs and put money back into people's pockets until they can do things they might otherwise not be able to do. As simple as going out for dinner or buying your kids clothes. That's what hits home, not just continuously taxing people. And that's exactly the reason we've never raised a tax. In our 2026 budget alone, we delivered nearly $12 billion in direct support to Ontario families, helping deal with rising costs and economic pressure. And we aren't stopping there, because real relief begins with the biggest purchase most families will ever make, a new home. I was thinking about young people. I was thinking about families that now can have the dream of home ownership. That's why we're removing the full 13% HST on new homes valued up to $1 million. This is delivering up to $130,000 in savings for Ontario homebuyers. If there was ever a time to buy a home, it's right now.
I guess the cottage love affair between Carney and Ford is over? But no, in all seriousness, if a future Ontario Liberal leader comes out saying that the system is broken, temporary resident numbers are too high, permits need to expire, Canada and Ontario need limits, suddenly Ford no longer owns that issue. And that's dangerous for him politically. Because Ford's entire coalition depends on suburban voters, working class families, immigrants, homeowners, and young people frustrated with affordability and the quality of life. And if the Liberals pivot towards a more populist, nationalist, middle class message on immigration and housing, they could start stealing voters directly from Doug Ford's Conservatives. Ford could get squeezed from both sides. You've got conservatives attacking him for enabling the problem because he's not actually a real conservative, and liberals attacking him for doing nothing about it for nearly a decade. And let's be honest for a second here. The housing crisis exploded under Doug Ford's watch. He doesn't stand up to the Liberal government. So if Ontario Liberals start connecting population growth directly to rent prices, traffic, overcrowded hospitals, and collapsing infrastructure, on top of having someone on the other side, his opponent, saying it loud and clear, the opposite of what Ford is doing, Ford suddenly has to defend his own record instead of just blaming Trudeau and Carney. So there's Nate resigning, and obviously we all know that there was tension between him and Carney. There's Doug Ford now all of a sudden being a conservative again, calling out the Liberals' high taxes and the potential future Liberal leader of Ontario, Eric Lombardi, saying that the Liberals have basically failed and that immigration is a problem, acting like a conservative on the issue. And there's also Stephen Guilbeault, former environment minister, despising that Carney is not actually a net zero guy, not the one that he thought he was, not because he cares about the planet, Mark Carney will build a pipeline if it's profitable for him. not because it's not that he cares about the planet. Now, although I believe Guilbeault is a complete nutcase with a radical net zero kind of mind, I mean, didn't he scale the CN Tower and got arrested? I mean, he said himself in the House of Commons that he's a proud socialist. He's another problem for Carney. Listen to him here on Power and Politics.
We're getting near the end point, it seems, on the MOU discussion between Alberta and the federal government. Daniel Smith was on the show Friday and said there's a meeting of the minds. We're just in the final drafting of language. We could even see something this week. What are your concerns? Because I know this was a big reason why you left the federal cabinet. What are your concerns that you see that they have apparently found common ground? I mean, what would be the thing you're most worried you could see in the MOU when and if it comes this week?
I published an op-ed in the Toronto Star a few weeks ago expressing some of those concerns. I'm obviously not against the idea of signing an agreement with Alberta on many of these things. I think what is important is that we ensure that some of the commitments we've made on things like carbon pricing in Budget 2025, we said that we would continue increasing pricing post 2030, and we know that if we want to get effective transition in the industrial sector, the price needs to be higher. We need to keep the clean electricity regulations because it will ensure we decarbonize the electricity sector, which is at the heart of everything we will be doing in the coming years. More and more industries will run on electricity. Our transportation will run more and more on electricity. Our buildings. If we don't decarbonize this, we can't decarbonize society. So these are the sort of things I will be looking for in a perhaps announcement this week on the MOU with Alberta.
Stephen Guilbeault, we always appreciate the time. Thanks for being here, sir, and we will hold you to that if we see legislation.
Point today.
Well, and Vashi, remember, who's the most outspoken critic of this fast tracking? It's Justin Trudeau's environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who until 5.5 months ago was the Quebec lieutenant for who? Prime Minister Mark Carney. So they have a problem, I think, internally, the Liberals do. I think maybe there's 10, maybe there's a dozen, maybe there's 25 Liberal MPs who are not comfortable with the direction that Mr. Carney is going. But you know what? They're going to probably button their lips for a while.
First of all, Stephen Guilbeault is a radical leftist Lulu. All he cares about is carbon pricing and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? He represents a faction of Carney's caucus and of people who voted for Carney and now openly admitting there's growing frustration inside the Liberal caucus over Mark Carney's direction on pipelines and energy. I wouldn't be surprised if he's been whispering in the ears of all the radical climate net zero people in the Liberal caucus about Mark Carney's MOU. I mean, since he stepped down, he's probably been having conversations with people in his caucus. I mean, we all know Carney doesn't actually care about the environment. He's invested in net zero. He is the architect of it. And I mean, if he can make money through the Pathways Project and carbon credits and all that net zero stuff and ride on the train of the world wants our clean energy. No, they don't. They want our energy. That's what they want. Nobody has said that they would pay more for our energy because it's clean. They don't care. Nobody in the world cares. If they did, like Europe says that apparently Europe wants our clean energy, but I mean, they're still buying from the United States. They're still buying from Russia. So I mean, do they really care about clean energy? So yeah, if he could make money through the Pathways Project and carbon credits that he's invested in, like all this net zero stuff that Brookfield is highly invested in. I mean, please don't tell me that these people care about the planet. I think Guilbeault is starting to see that he's not actually like the kind of net zero guy that he thought he was, like from the goodness of his heart and his love of the planet, but more so for his pocket. I mean, they're all a bunch of hypocrites, jet setting around the world and virtue signaling about the environment.
The answer to the question, though, is why is it okay for Canada to export these materials for consumer use in other countries, but we can't use them here at home?
So we are domestically doing what we can to protect.
So then why enable other countries to pursue a toxic?
Well, my hope is through global plastics treaties, we're actually going to move the world away from.
Why not stop exporting? I mean, that would contribute to your goals, right?
I think, well, first, common goals for all Canadians to not want to have plastics washing up on our shores and not have them in our
So
green
you're
spaces.
telling me that it's okay for plastic to fall in or be dumped into the Milk River in Montana, flow into Alberta, and that's okay because, it's okay to export it to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It still shows up on our shores. So I'm trying to understand the hypocrisy of the...
Remember when Justin Trudeau wanted to ban single-use plastics and then being photographed just like a couple weeks ago using single-use plastics at Coachella? Hypocrite. For years, the Liberals pushed aggressive climate policies, anti-oil rhetoric, carbon taxes, and endless environmental regulations, all while Canada's economy, energy sector, and affordability suffered, and therefore the people of Canada have suffered because of this. Now suddenly, Mark Carney appears, keyword appears, to be shifting towards the center more. Why? Is it because Canadians are tired of the Liberals' BS way of thinking when it comes to the environment? Is it because we're tired of the unaffordable energy, weak economic growth, and policies that push domestic industry while other countries keep producing oil anyways? We can export plastics, but we can't use it ourselves. So stupid. Could it also be because the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, has been pushing for pipelines since he became leader of the opposition? He made it a problem. He has been tying Canada's economic decline to the decisions the Liberals have made and have been pushing the Liberals to make changes. Now, if Carney really wanted to make changes, he already would have done it. Enough with consultations and all these bad laws put in place. Repeal the bad laws that prevent a pipeline from getting built and get out of the way. But they have not done that. They need to further discuss and consult. How many lunches does it take to get a pipeline approved? And also, there are two types of Liberals in Canada, in my perspective. You've got the net zero activists like Guilbeault who have like TDS and don't want to deal with America, the elbows up kind of crowd who don't want pipelines and want to allow Indigenous activist groups to veto the projects. And then you have the regular Liberals who just want to deal with America and they want prosperity for this country and who voted for Carney because he was supposed to be some great economic wizard who was going to navigate Canada out of the crisis that he helped put us in. But anyways, and after a year of nothing, people are starting to see that A, he doesn't want to deal with America, and B, he doesn't actually want prosperity for this country and to build Canada strong because the pipeline would already be underway. He hasn't repealed a single anti-energy law, so no, it doesn't look like he wants a pipeline, but I mean, he has to produce something, right? Like, he has to make sure that it looks like he's doing something, but he also has to make sure that he'll make money through pathways, through carbon credits, through carbon taxes, through all this net zero stuff. Why is there an MOU with Alberta in the first place? Why not just get out of the way and let a pipeline be built? Because they need this, they need that, they need net zero kind of stuff, but like, all because he's invested in it.
With all this momentum, Canada has still fallen behind because Canada has been unable to attract a meaningful share of global investment, because capital goes where it's welcome, and for too long it has not felt welcome here, because Canada is no longer competing only within its borders or even just across North America. We are competing with the world under a very different set of expectations. It's why in 2025 the U.S. sanctioned $56 billion of LNG-related projects. Canada made no sanctionings in the same period. Through our recently completed Southeast Gateway project, I've seen firsthand how that country is working hard to attract investment. We began construction on our project 8 months after filing for our permits. And in under 3 years from the filing, we put a 700-kilometer subsea pipeline into service with comprehensive environmental reviews. And further, because of their plan to grow, they call it Plan 2030, President Sheinbaum has set an ambition of attracting $300 billion of investment by 2030.
That was François Poirier, another CEO of another energy company, basically that's saying that Canada is a loser. Why can't this company do what they're doing in Mexico? Because the Liberals do not want them to. But he's got to do something, right? Or at least make it look like he's doing something, because even Liberals are like, why? Like, where are the results? And now the activist wing of the Liberal Party is like, what is happening here? Guilbeault basically represents the ideological climate activist faction of the Liberals, the people who believed Canada could regulate its way to environment virtue while ignoring economic consequences. That's just not possible. Like, you can't have a good economy and then push for carbon, taxes and like just suppress industry. And Carney has to make it look like he's doing something, so he's pissing off all these activists like Guilbeault. But in the end, will there ever be anything like a pipeline or an LNG facility built here without him making money off of it? I'll believe it when I see it. So what we're watching now is an internal liberal civil war. Activists versus pragmatists, and ideology versus economic reality. And I mean, this is all just proving that conservatives, it proves something we have been saying for years. It proves that we were right. Eventually, reality catches up with ideology, and now, will we see a pipeline be fast-tracked? Or are we just talking about it being fast-tracked? Only time will tell. But I ain't betting my money on it, that's for sure.
I thought that poll was very interesting and striking in the way in which people have, the flip that has occurred. I remember in 2019 talking, especially to you, about how climate change was such an issue at the doors. And now, is it just going to be okay for the Prime Minister to say, well, the economy comes first?
It's pretty striking, but I don't think we'd be surprised. I think this panel has talked about it numerous times, that the economy is not only the focus, but it's also the economy with the backdrop of everything that was happening with the U.S., whether it's the trade conflict or whether it's the talk of sovereignty that we had not too long ago. So I think with that backdrop, we aren't totally surprised. My sense is that people still care about the environment. They still want to see action on climate change, but they are just so focalized on the idea that the economy needs to get going. They feel angst about the affordability challenges that they're facing, gas prices, the affordability of housing. I mean, all of these things are at the forefront, and they're living it week after week, but I still think people care about the environment. So to your question, will this maybe bite them? Look, it's really interesting, because if they do a great job on the economy and they do a great job on affordability and people are feeling good and they sort of address that certainty, you could see the environment start to all of a sudden become all that much more important, because people say, okay, I'm feeling good about my financial future, about the economy here in the country, about our sovereignty. Now we got to start getting to the things that I cared about, that I prioritize more, and that I care about, that aren't necessarily the day-to-day stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, as the more that they actually address the economy and trade with the U.S. and sort of trade overall, maybe people start to care a little bit more and prioritize a little bit more of the environment and climate change.
I think even maybe the support or the political capital that the Prime Minister has is dependent on the stuff he's doing working. And I obviously that's general, but even more specific. If you're going to all of a sudden decide to not all of a sudden, but to truncate the review process to a year from what it is in multiple cases, many years, like, does the pipeline actually get built? Is there an actual private proponent? Does the investment flow that you're saying that they are contending needs to, this regulatory stuff needs to be unlocked in order for that to happen?
And we're about to find out. It's always been said that there is no case, there is no project, there is no proposal on the table. Therefore, it didn't matter that the regulatory system ground any possible proposal to virtually a halt. Now, if the regulatory system is kind of, opened up a little bit more, and you have more certainty on how long it's going to take, and you have some firmer guidelines on what's important, what's not important, those are the kinds of things that will actually help draw the investment in. I did want to say one thing. I agree with what Brian said. I think what the key here is, how long will this go on for? This inversion between economic growth and environment. I think it's going to be longer than anyone anticipated.
Why?
Because we are disrupted in so many ways. We've got war going on. We've got AI problems. We've got a housing crisis. People are so uncertain about their futures. They all go back to the one thing that they want to make sure they have, and that's a strong economy. So I think the environment is, unfortunately, Tom's maybe going to disagree with me, but I think it's going to be a lower priority for a longer period of time just because of the disruption in this world.
I've said it before, caring about the climate is a luxury. The single mom working 3 jobs just to put a roof over her head and her kid's head and food in her kid's mouth is not caring about the environment. She's just not. She would rather not pay a carbon tax for the environment. Like, she would rather not pay that and be able to afford a better life for her kids. If she was able to afford a good life for her kids, maybe then she wouldn't mind paying a carbon tax. But that's not the reality that Canada is in right now. If you don't have your basics taken care of, that's what you're focused on. That's why people like Stephen Guilbeault are just not in touch with reality. Maybe they can afford to care about the climate and don't mind paying a carbon tax, which, by the way, is doing what exactly? What is the carbon tax doing? Come on. So maybe they can afford to pay for these kinds of things, afford to pay for net zero and pushing on environment and all that kind of stuff, but the majority of Canadians can't. We just can't. And so we don't care about it. Anyways, that should be all for today, guys. I hope that you have a beautiful Wednesday, and I will see you again on Friday. Bye.